Welcome to another episode of She's Evolving. I'm Elena, your resident medical endocrinologist, and today we are diving into a topic that feels like the unholy trinity for so many of us navigating life after 40. We're talking about why your sleep has suddenly become a battlefield, why stress feels like it's physically weighing you down, and why your metabolism seems to have gone on a permanent vacation.
And I'm Julia,
a clinical psychologist. I see this every day in my practice. Women who are high-achieving, capable, and resilient, yet they feel like they're losing a war against their own bodies. They look in the mirror and ask, who is this woman? Why am I so tired? Why am I so reactive? If you've ever felt like you're doing everything right, but your body is telling a different story, this episode is for you. We're going to look at the integrated connection between your hormones, your brain, and your heart. Before we get deep into the science and the solutions, we want to invite you to join our community. If you find value in these conversations, please follow the podcast, leave us a review, and share this episode with a friend who might be staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m. right now. We're in this together.
Elena, let's start with a bit of honesty here. We aren't just experts, we're women in our 50s living this reality. I have to admit, lately, my relationship with my alarm clock has become toxic. I used to be the person who could survive on 6 hours and a strong latte. Now, if I don't get a solid 7 or 8, I feel like my brain is wrapped in cotton wool the next day. And don't even get me started on the 3 a.m. anxiety loop, where I start worrying about things I haven't thought of in 20 years.
Julia, it's funny you say that, because even as an endocrinologist, I wasn't immune. A few years ago, when my perimenopause really started to kick in, I felt like my body had staged a coup. I was eating the same things, exercising the same way, but suddenly I had this new layer of padding around my midsection that wouldn't budge. And the fatigue. It wasn't just I need a nap tired, it was a bone-deep exhaustion. I remember sitting in my office, looking at a patient's charts, and having to read the same sentence 4 times because my brain just wouldn't process it. It's a very vulnerable feeling to realize that the vessel you've lived in for 5 decades is changing the rules of the game without giving you the new manual. That brain fog is so real. And I think for many of us, it leads to a crisis of identity. We start thinking, am I losing my edge? Am I getting old? Am I becoming invisible? There's a psychological weight to it that is just as heavy as the physical changes. I hear from so many women who feel like they are failing at aging. They see the weight gain or the irritability as a character flaw rather than a physiological shift. Exactly. And that's where the science becomes so empowering. It's not a character flaw, it's biology. Let's talk about that unholy trinity. When we hit our 40s and 50s, our estrogen levels start to fluctuate and eventually drop. Estrogen isn't just about reproduction. It's a master regulator of our metabolism and our sleep-wake cycle. When estrogen drops, our body becomes more sensitive to cortisol, the stress hormone.
And cortisol is the ultimate storage hormone, isn't it?
Precisely. In the wild, cortisol was meant to help us run away from a saber-toothed tiger. It tells the body, we are in danger, save every calorie, store fat around the vital organs. The problem is, in 2024, the tiger is a demanding boss, an aging parent, or a teenager who won't listen. Our bodies are stuck in survival mode 24/7. And when you add poor sleep to that mix, it's a recipe for metabolic disaster.
Let's connect those dots for a second. When we don't sleep, our emotional regulation goes out the window. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that handles logic and impulse control, basically goes offline. Meanwhile, the amygdala, our emotional alarm system, becomes hyper-reactive. This is why, after a bad night of sleep, you're more likely to snap at your partner or find yourself at the bottom of a bag of chips by 4 p.m.
And there's a hormonal reason for those chips, Julia. When we're sleep-deprived, 2 key hormones go haywire, ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin is the hunger hormone. It goes up, screaming at you to eat. Leptin is the fullness hormone. It goes down, so your brain never gets the signal that you've had enough. So you aren't weak for wanting that bagel or those cookies. Your hormones are literally hijacking your willpower. You're seeking a quick hit of glucose to keep your exhausted brain functioning. It's a vicious cycle. You're stressed, so you don't sleep. Because you don't sleep, your cortisol stays high. Because cortisol is high, you crave sugar and store belly fat. because you're gaining weight and feeling tired, you feel more stressed and depressed about your body. It's like being on a merry-go-round that won't stop.
And the metabolism part is fascinating because it's not just about burning calories. After 40, we also start losing muscle mass, a process called sarcopenia, unless we are very intentional about it. Muscle is our metabolic engine. When we lose muscle and our hormones shift, our basal metabolic rate drops. This means we actually need fewer calories than we did at 25, but our bodies are demanding more because of the stress and lack of sleep.
I want to pause here because I can almost hear our listeners thinking, okay, great, so I'm a hormonal mess and my metabolism is broken. Now what? Is this just my life now? We hear this a lot, don't we, Elena? This idea that libido disappears, energy vanishes, and we just have to accept it.
Oh, absolutely. One of the biggest myths I hear in my clinic is, my libido is gone because I'm old and it's never coming back. That is simply not true. Libido is complex. Yes, there is a hormonal component, testosterone and estrogen play a role, but it's also about that stress and exhaustion we were just talking about. If you are in survival mode, your body isn't going to prioritize sex. Evolutionarily, you don't mate when you're being chased by a tiger.
And from a psychological perspective, libido is tied to how we feel in our skin. If a woman feels fat, tired, or unattractive because of these metabolic changes, she's going to disconnect from her sensuality. I tell my patients that the most important sex organ is the brain. We have to address the stress and the self-image before we can expect the spark to return. It's not that the libido disappeared, it's just buried under a mountain of laundry, work emails, and cortisol.
Another myth is that you just need to eat less and run more. I see so many women in their 40s doing intense cardio for an hour a day and eating 1,200 calories, and they are still gaining weight. Why? Because they are adding more stress to an already stressed system. Over-exercising without proper recovery raises cortisol even higher, which tells the body to hold on to fat even tighter.
That is such a crucial point. We've been conditioned to believe that more is more. More work, more exercise, more doing. But at this stage of life, less is often more. More rest, more intentional movement, more boundaries. Elena, what about supplements? Everyone is looking for a magic pill. I get asked about melatonin all the time. Melatonin can be a tool, but it's not a cure-all. It's a hormone, not a vitamin, and taking too much can actually disrupt your body's natural production. The real magic happens in what we call sleep hygiene and light exposure. We need to tell our brains that the day has ended, and that means getting off the blue light of our phones, which mimics sunlight, at least an hour before bed. It's also about emotional hygiene. I often suggest to my clients that they have a worry dump 2 hours before bed. Write down everything that's bothering you on a piece of paper. Get it out of your head and onto the page. Tell your brain, I see these problems, and I will deal with them tomorrow at 9 a.m. It helps break that 3 a.m. anxiety loop. I love that. And physically, we need to focus on protein and strength training. Instead of that hour on the treadmill, try 20 minutes of lifting weights. Build that muscle engine back up. Feed your body enough protein to keep your blood sugar stable so you don't have those energy crashes that lead to sugar binges.
It really is an integrated approach. You can't fix the metabolism without fixing the sleep, and you can't fix the sleep without addressing the stress and the emotional narrative you're telling yourself. You know, Julia, as we talk about this, I'm reminded of a patient I had recently. Let's call her Sarah. She was 48, a high-level executive, and she came to me saying she felt like she was glitching. She couldn't sleep, she had gained 15 pounds in 6 months, and she was convinced she had a thyroid problem. When we did her blood work, her thyroid was actually okay, but her cortisol was through the roof, and her progesterone was non-existent.
That glitching feeling is such a perfect description. It's like the software is no longer compatible with the hardware.
Exactly. And Sarah's first instinct was to punish herself. She started a keto diet and joined a boot camp. Predictably, she felt worse. She was even more exhausted and her weight didn't move. We had to sit down and completely change her strategy. We prioritized sleep first. We added magnesium, we worked on her wind-down routine, and we switched her boot camp for heavy lifting and long walks. We also talked about HRT, hormone replacement therapy, which for many women can be a life changer when done under supervision.
And did she work on the psychological side?
because a woman like Sarah usually has a perfectionist voice in her head that is very loud. She did. She started seeing a therapist to deal with the superwoman syndrome. She had to learn that saying no to an extra project at work was actually a medical necessity for her health. 6 months later, she was a different person. Not because she lost the weight, though she did lose some, but because she had her energy back. She felt like herself again. She wasn't glitching anymore.
That's the goal, isn't it? It's not about chasing a version of ourselves that existed at 25. It's about being the most vibrant, functional, and joyful version of ourselves at 50, 60, and beyond. This transition, perimenopause and menopause, is often called the second spring in some cultures. It's a time of shedding what no longer serves us. I love that term, the second spring. It implies that while things are changing, they are also blooming. But you can't bloom if you're exhausted and depleted. You have to nourish the soil. So to our listeners who are feeling stuck in that cycle of stress and exhaustion, please hear us when we say that you are not broken. Your body is navigating a massive biological shift in a world that wasn't designed for your rest. Your metabolism hasn't betrayed you. It's trying to protect you. Your brain isn't failing, it's overwhelmed. The key is to stop fighting against your body and start listening to what it's asking for. Usually it's asking for more grace, more protein, more heavy weights, and definitely more sleep. As we wrap up today's conversation, I want to leave you with a reflection. Tonight, when you lay your head on the pillow, instead of running through your to-do list or criticizing your body for the changes you see, try to offer it some gratitude. Your body has carried you through 4 or 5 decades of life. It has survived heartbreaks, perhaps carried children, navigated careers, and kept you moving. It deserves your partnership, not your judgment. Beautifully said, Julia. Your body is changing, but this isn't the end of your story. It's a new chapter, one where you can be more intentional, more powerful, and more you than ever before. If you're feeling the glitch, reach out. Talk to a professional. Find a doctor who listens, and remember that you aren't alone in this journey. We are here with you, evolving right alongside you. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with a sister, a friend, or a colleague. Let's break the silence around these changes and support each other in our evolution. Thank you for listening to She's Evolving. Next week, we'll be talking about the invisible woman syndrome, how to reclaim your space and your voice as you age. You won't want to miss it. Until then, take a deep breath, prioritize your rest, and remember, you are exactly where you need to be. We'll see you next time. She's Evolving is a production dedicated to the journey of the modern woman. For more resources, visit our website and follow us on social media. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. Your voice helps us reach more women who are ready to evolve. Sleep well, breathe deep, and be kind to yourself.
You know, Julia, it's fascinating and equally frustrating how we've been conditioned to think of these things as separate compartments. We think, oh, I'm just stressed because of work, or I'm just sleeping poorly because I'm getting older, and I'm gaining weight because my willpower is failing. But as we were discussing, the body doesn't work in silos. It's a beautifully and sometimes maddeningly integrated symphony. When we talk about this specific triangle of sleep, stress, and metabolism, we are looking at the very core of how a woman's body navigates her 40s and 50s. If one string of the violin is out of tune, the whole orchestra sounds off.
That's a perfect metaphor, Elena. And from the psychological side, I see so many women who come to me feeling like they've lost control of the conductor. They feel like they're doing everything right. They're trying to eat less, they're pushing through the fatigue, but they feel emotionally fragile. What they don't realize is that their brain is essentially operating in a state of emergency. When you don't sleep and your stress is through the roof, your brain doesn't think about self-actualization or inner peace. It thinks about survival. And survival, in biological terms, often means store fat and find quick energy, which usually translates to a 10 p.m. kitchen raid for anything sweet or salty. Exactly. And there's a biological reason for that pantry raid. When we are sleep deprived, 2 very specific hormones go haywire, ghrelin and leptin. Ghrelin is the one that says, I'm hungry, feed me. And leptin is the one that says, okay, we're full, you can stop now. When you haven't slept well,
ghrelin spikes and leptin plummets. So you're not just tired, you are biologically programmed to be hungrier and less capable of feeling full. Add to that the drop in estrogen we experience in our 40s, which already makes our bodies more insulin resistant, and you have the perfect storm for weight gain around the midsection. It's not a lack of willpower, Julia. It's a hormonal mutiny.
A hormonal mutiny. I love that term. It's so validating for women to hear that, because the first thing we do is blame ourselves. We think, I used to be so disciplined. What happened to me? We internalize it as a character flaw, and that guilt creates more stress, which, guess what? Leads to even worse sleep. It's a vicious cycle. I often tell my patients that we need to stop looking at the scale and start looking at the peace we are allowing ourselves. If you're constantly in fight or flight mode because your boss is demanding, your kids are leaving the nest, or you're caring for aging parents, your body is bathed in cortisol, and cortisol is the enemy of a deep restorative sleep and a healthy metabolism. It really is. Cortisol tells the body to hold on to every calorie because it thinks a famine or a predator is coming. And for a woman in perimenopause or menopause, this is amplified. The tired but wired feeling is the classic symptom of cortisol being high at the wrong time. You're exhausted all day, but the moment your head hits the pillow at 11 p.m., your mind starts racing. You start thinking about a comment someone made 3 years ago, or you start worrying about a meeting tomorrow. Then the night sweats kick in because your thermoregulation is off due to low estrogen, and suddenly it's 3 a.m., you're awake and you're frustrated. And that 3 a.m. window is where the emotional demons live, isn't it? That's when our anxieties feel the most real. Without the filter that a rested brain provides, every problem looks like a mountain. This is why I always emphasize sleep hygiene, not just as a physical habit, but as an act of self-love and mental health preservation. We have to give ourselves permission to disconnect, but it's hard. We're the generation of women who were told we could have it all, do it all, and be it all. Admitting we're tired feels like admitting defeat.
It shouldn't feel like defeat. It should feel like a pivot. We're evolving into a phase where our bodies require a different kind of maintenance. This leads us perfectly into some of the myths we hear all the time. One of the biggest ones I hear in my office is, Elena, I'll just catch up on my sleep over the weekend. Julia, as a psychologist, you know how that affects the routine. But medically, I have to tell everyone, you cannot bank sleep. You can't recover a week of 5-hour nights with one 10-hour Sunday. Your metabolism doesn't work that way. The disruption to your circadian rhythm has already happened.
That's so true. And another myth I hear constantly is a glass of wine helps me sleep. Women use it as a way to turn off the stress of the day. But while alcohol might help you fall asleep faster, it absolutely destroys the quality of your REM sleep. You wake up feeling like you've been hit by a truck, even if you were out for 7 hours. And then, because you're tired, you drink more caffeine the next day, which keeps you up the next night. And the cycle continues.
Right. And then there's the myth that stress is just a mental thing. People think if they can tough it out mentally, their body won't notice. But your cells don't know the difference between a deadline and a physical threat. They react the same way. I also get asked a lot about supplements, like, can I just take melatonin and fix everything? Melatonin can help, but it's not a magic pill. If you're taking melatonin but still scrolling on your blue light emitting phone until midnight, you're sending contradictory signals to your brain.
I think the biggest myth of all, though, is that we have to accept this decline as inevitable, that we just have to be fat, tired, and cranky because we're over 45. That is absolutely not true. This stage of life is a reorganization. It's an opportunity to look at our habits and say, what served me at 30 doesn't serve me now. It's about being kinder to the skin we're in. Elena, what's one practical thing you tell your patients who feel stuck in this sleep, stress, weight triangle? I tell them to start with micro wins. Don't try to change your whole life tomorrow. Start by setting a digital sunset. Turn off screens 30 minutes before bed. This lowers cortisol and lets your natural melatonin rise. From a metabolic standpoint, try to eat your last meal a bit earlier, so your body isn't trying to digest a heavy dinner while it's trying to lower its core temperature for sleep. Small shifts lead to big hormonal changes over time. And from my side, I suggest a brain dump. Before you go to bed, write down everything that's worrying you on a piece of paper. Get it out of your head and onto the page. Tell your brain, it's okay, we have a record of this, we can deal with it at 9 a.m. It's about creating a boundary between the doing part of your day and the being part of your night.
We need to honor our rest as much as we honor our work. That's so powerful, Julia. It really is about integration. You can't fix the metabolism without addressing the stress, and you can't lower the stress if you aren't sleeping. It's all connected. And as we wrap up this conversation, I want to remind everyone listening, your body is not your enemy. It's a sophisticated system that is trying to tell you something. If you're gaining weight, if you're exhausted, if you're feeling emotional, your body isn't failing you. It's asking you for a different kind of care. Exactly. This isn't the end of your vitality. It's the beginning of a more conscious version of it. You are evolving, and evolution requires shedding old skins and old habits. It's okay to slow down. It's okay to prioritize your rest. In fact, it's the most productive thing you can do for your health and your happiness in this second half of life. We hope this episode sheds some light on why you've been feeling the way you have. Remember, you don't have to do this alone. If you found comfort or clarity in our talk today, please follow the She's Evolving podcast. Share this episode with a sister, a friend, or a colleague who might be lying awake at 3 a.m. wondering why things have changed. We are in this together. Every change is a chance to rediscover who you are. Thank you for being part of our community. Keep evolving, keep questioning, and most importantly, keep being kind to yourself. We'll see you in the next episode. Take care of your body, take care of your mind, and sleep well tonight. Goodbye for now.